welcome back to Legally Armed, Locked, Loaded and Lawful. And today we're here with Paul Ehlers from the Sandton branch of Legally Armed. And we're going to be chatting to him and just finding out about the branch in general, how we can get hold of them, and what areas they cover around that specific spot. So welcome, Paul. It's good to have you on the show.
Yes, thanks for having me, Tim. It's a pleasure to be talking to you.
So let's start from the beginning. How did you get involved with Legally Armed?
First time when I got involved, I basically saw one of Legally Armed's Facebook posts. Then I got in touch with Bernu and also with Johan, who was in charge at that time. And yes, we had a very fruitful discussion, and they told me that the Sandton branch or agency was available. And yes, then I grabbed the opportunity.
Oh, that's great. And how many years have you been involved with Legally Armed now?
So it will be 6 years now. So yes, since about July 2018.
Yeah. Collectively, Legally Armed's got a lot of experience with all the partners that are involved in it. So it's good to see that at least there's a wealth of knowledge and experience between everyone when it comes to doing this thing. And obviously, Legally Armed is one of the oldest firearms companies that does the kind of work that we do in South Africa. So it's great to see that you're on board. So what can you tell the viewers in Sandton? So what areas do you cover? I take it obviously you've got the Sandton area, but there's areas around it. Who can all come to you for services?
So Tim, we covered the whole of Johannesburg North, primarily Sandton, but then all the way out to Fourways, Midrand, Randburg. I've had a couple of clients as far as Alberton, but yes, primarily Sandton, Fourways, and Randburg.
Okay, so over the years in dealing with the area that you have you found that there's been an increase of people looking to get firearms and looking to get their competencies sorted out and that sort of stuff?
So I think, over the years there has been a slight increase, I've also have a lot of return customers or return clients, it's been steadily increasing over time.
No, definitely. And on your day-to-day work, what are the sort of main things that you're focusing on? What are you finding that people are coming back for most often?
So mainly I deal with individual customers, and it ranges from your self-defense applications, sport shooting and hunting, and also estate transfers of estate firearms. Where I find the most people returning is your sport shooting enthusiasts. Which is very popular in the Johannesburg area, and also your dedicated hunters. But I would say mostly the sport shooters.
Yeah, sport shooting is definitely picking up in South Africa, and a lot of people want to get those types of firearms to do sports. And what a lot of people don't realize that in South Africa, it's not necessarily firearms for self-defense. Firearms we use for a variety of things other than self-defense and hunting. There's a lot of sport shooting going on. There's a lot of youth getting involved in shooting as well. A lot of youngsters doing a lot of target shooting, and it's a genuine sport that people partake in. There's different organizations that you can belong to in terms of SADPA. There's 3-gun that you can do. There's a whole lot of different things. Clay pigeon shooting. So the sport as itself is actually growing quite a lot. So a lot of people aren't necessarily getting firearms for self-defense, but they're actually getting firearms to do sport. And that's quite an important thing to remember. And you said something that's quite important too, is state firearms. And I've noticed that a lot of people come into a bit of a conundrum when they have a loved one that passes away and they have a whole lot of firearms and they don't really know what to do with them. So what would the process be for someone that needed to do an estate firearm in order to either have it transferred to their name or transferred to someone else's name? If they came to you, what would they need to do?
So yes, if they want to keep the firearm or transfer it into their own name, the first thing obviously is to make sure that they have the relevant competency for that firearm. If they don't have competency yet, I usually refer them to do the competency training. Once that is done, then I will assist the client with applying for the SAPS competency, and then after that, the license application. We obviously need all the details of the executor, and the executor needs to sign off on the transfer. A lot of the estate inquiries I get is actually directly from the executor, and most of the time they would be looking to keep the firearm. Occasionally they want to transfer the firearm to somebody else if there's no one in the family with competency, and then I help that person through the process as well.
And would you suggest that people rather do that than hand over the firearms to SAPS for destruction?
Definitely, because you never know what happens at SAPS, whether the firearm do get destroyed or not, and then obviously the firearm is an asset in the estate, and sometimes it can be quite a valuable asset, and to just dispose of it like that is from various aspects it just doesn't make sense. What I also find is that some executors, even some attorneys, are reluctant to deal with the estate firearms, either through lack of knowledge or because they're too busy to do it. And that is someplace where we can assist as well. We can, if an attorney has been appointed as executor, we can assist the executor to get all the admin out of the way for him, and he doesn't have to worry about it.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's people will look at the process and they sort of have a bit of a heart attack. There's this prevailing sort of myth in South Africa, but when it comes around when it surrounds firearms, that anything to do with a firearm is incredibly difficult to do. So it's incredibly difficult to get a firearm license, or it's incredibly difficult to transfer a firearm into someone else's name. And these are sort of myths that we need to dispel, because actually, if you come to legally armed, and in a lot of cases, people don't even need to come to a company like Legally Armed. You can do it yourself, or Legally Armed will make that process easier for you. Yes, the admin is incredibly cumbersome. There's a lot of paperwork. There's a lot of things that you need to fill in, a lot of requirements that you have to fulfill. But it's not as difficult as it's made out to be. It's this idea that it's almost impossible to do, or that you'll never get a firearm license, needs to be sort of dispelled. It's not the case. And if you've got experts like Paul from Legally Armed that work in the industry and have been doing so for such a long time, these sort of things get dealt with and get handled quite easily. So it's great. So Paul, in terms of other services that are offered, I know the common ones are firearms, new applications, new competency applications, and estate firearms. What sort of other services do you offer at Legally Armed?
So at the Sandton branch, we are focused on the applications that you mentioned, and we also do some consulting, and we also there's a lot of security companies that need to apply for firearm licenses and to renew those licenses. So we also help them to keep track of those licenses, and The same for our individual clients. We help them keep track of their expiry dates, remind them when it is due for renewal, and that's.
Yeah, and it's pretty much every aspect to do with the Firearms Control Act. And I mean, you say something, you mentioned security companies. You get some security companies that have 50, 60 firearms on their stock. They've purchased them all at once. They were licensed maybe at different times. And someone needs to manage that process, because you can very quickly find yourself stuck and sitting with licenses that are expired. Not that that's a train smash or the end of the world. It can also be dealt with, and that's something that Legally Armed can also deal with too. But having someone or a company that can actually deal with that mass process. I mean, imagine having to submit. Well, you don't have to imagine. You've done it before. Having to submit multiple firearm applications at once. I think for a security company owner whose names that firearms in, seeing that must be quite a shock to the system. So at least having Legally Armed to do it for you takes a lot of the burden off of it.
Yes, absolutely. And as you also mentioned, the admin involved is quite intensive. And it's not that it's a difficult process. It's actually quite an easy process. But especially when you're dealing with multiple applications, there can be a lot of paperwork involved.
Yeah, and definitely a lot of numbers when you're dealing with all the different serial numbers that are involved as well, I can imagine.
Yes.
So, in terms of getting a firearm in South Africa, what would your advice be to someone who's starting out the process and wants to come to you? What do they need to have in place in order to start the entire process before they even get to you to assist them with their first applications?
So yes, I actually get a lot of clients who comes to me and who wants to know how to start with the process. They've never dealt with anything like that before. They have no knowledge of what to do. So I can easily assist those clients as well, and I explain the entire process for them. It does make it easier if they've already done their proficiency training at the very least. But if they haven't done any training, then it's no roadblock, and I can assist them from scratch.
Oh, that's great. So, are there any specifics? You obviously deal with various different kinds of DFOs offices in the areas that you are in. So you don't necessarily deal with specifically Sandton, but you mentioned Alberton and different stations in the north. Because obviously, when you do your application, you have to go to your local police station. Are there any specifics that people need to be aware of in the areas that are under your responsibility? Like, for example, I know when I applied for my firearm in Stellenbosch, one of the prerequisites, and it was because of a court order or court judgment that had been made, where I had to submit a letter from my doctor saying that I was mentally sound and mentally stable. Obviously, it's not within the confines of the Act itself, but I didn't want to fight with them, and I didn't want to have arguments about it. I got the letter. It was quite quick and simple to get it from my doctor. But are there those sort of things that people need to be aware of in your area, or is it are they following the law to the T, at least, per se?
So most of the police stations I deal with do follow the law to the T, and they are actually quite good at that. The only police station where you do need to practice a bit more care, I would say, is Douglasdale. They are very strict in their requirements, and they sometimes have a bit of different requirements than the other stations. For instance, Douglasdale will only take a bank statement as a proof of address, although a letter from your landlord or a utility bill, all those are perfectly acceptable, but Douglasdale wants the bank statement specifically.
And with that, you obviously have to make sure that your FICA is right, because I know I've got a bank account with Capitec and it's still got an old address, so I'd obviously have to update that to make sure that it's the current address that I was living in.
Yes. So, and the other requirement that also mainly from Douglasdale is when applying for a Section 15 license for occasional sport shooting or hunting, is they insist on letters from a hunting farm or proof of participation in a shooting sport, which in the Act is not a requirement for Section 15. And none of the other police stations in the area require that, but it is something to be aware of at Douglasdale.
Yeah, and that's I've noticed this, and I've been involved in firearms organisations for many years now, and I've noticed that there are certain issues in certain stations, and each DFO has their certain way of doing things. So this is also why it's another important reminder to the viewers to start looking at joining organisations like the South African Gun Owners Association, so that they can take a look at these things and actually deal with it, so that the police do follow the law in terms of when it comes to applications, and then it doesn't make things difficult for everyone involved. Like I said, with a bank statement now, if I had to use my Capitec one, I'd have to go into the bank, change my FICA details and all that sort of stuff, and make sure that I had the right address, because otherwise they would say I'd have to apply in Fishhook because my bank account it looks like it's still in Fishhook. I've been trying to get them to change it for pretty much the better part of a decade, and every time I change it, they don't change it. So there's things like that need to be looked at, and that's why we advocate for joining organisations like Saga and Natshoot. Even though Natshoot is a hunting organisation, they also are involved and can have an impact in what happens. But yeah, Paul, thanks so much for being on the show. It's really been great chatting to you. Is there anything else that you'd like to add to tell the viewers? How do we get hold of you? I'll put the details for your Facebook page down and that sort of stuff. But how can they get hold of you? What are your details, email address, that sort of stuff?
So yes, the easiest way is via my cell phone or email address. I do have a contact me button on Facebook, which goes to my cell phone. But my cell phone number is 082 572 7982, and the email address is paul@legallyarmed.co.za.
So it's nice and simple to remember. So if you're in the Sandton area, it's not necessarily specifically Sandton, it's Johannesburg North area. Get in contact with Paul, and he can assist you with all your firearms needs in terms of new applications, license renewals, and just a reminder for this year, I think it's another 10-year deadline in terms of a renewal for Section 15 and Section 16 licenses. So a lot of people are going to have to renew now and this year, so just make sure we do a reminder a lot on our Facebook page to go and check your licenses when the expiry dates are. And what's I think it's the time period beforehand is 3 months or 90 days beforehand that you've got to actually start the process.
Yes, that's correct. 90 days.
Yeah, so check your licenses. It's something that you don't really do. I've got a little whiteboard marker permanent marker that I've written the dates on my safe, and whenever I have to renew it, then at least, or open my safe, I can look inside and I can see when the dates are, when everything expires. So at least I'm not going to do that. But that also encourages you to use your safe and take your guns out of the safe on a regular basis too. I always say a gun in the safe is as useless as the G in lasagna. If you've got firearms, get out there, get practicing, get on the range, shoot as often as possible as your budget requires you, because we know ammunition can be quite expensive at times. But get out there and get training, because this is why we do the sports that we do. We need to practice these things. So yeah, thanks, Paul Ehlers. Thanks so much for being on the show. It's been really great chatting to you, and I hope the guys in the area in your area of Gauteng give you a call and get their stuff sorted out.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for having me, Tim. It's been great to chat with you.
Awesome stuff. Thanks, Paul.